Okay, everybody, welcome to the HVAC Unfiltered Podcast with Seashore Comfort Solutions. I'm your host, Rich Ingalls, and this is my partner in crime today, Nick Flavin, one of the service technicians for for Seashore Comfort Solutions. Um, got him out of the field today. We're going to talk about some things that people have asked about and some other things that we just kind of randomly sashay into. As I always do, I start going onto a tangent, and then all hell breaks loose, and I'm on a completely different subject.
Ramble, right to the point.
That's how we do. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was when a customer has us come over to do an estimate for heat pump changeover from like a boiler or a furnace, and they want to go into mini splits or into a ducted heat pump type of system. I always have to get into a conversation with them about what the differences are between heating with a heat pump and cooling with a heat pump. Because we have two major differences when it comes to outdoor temperatures in heating and outdoor temperatures in cooling. My big thing is, what we were just talking about it, where it's like, people say, well, can I just put in a huge air conditioner? And you were in the Caribbean and you said they have air conditioners all over the place and they have them cranking nonstop. And it's, and what kind of an issue do they have over there?
You walk inside and it's like a pool
It's
on
just
the floor.
a puddle of water. You
Yeah.
get condensation on the floors because the dew point in the house or the building is so high that you cool the space so quickly that everything that's in that building starts to condense moisture because you can't pull the heat out of that. You can't pull the heat out of those chunks of concrete and stuff really quickly. You have
Right.
to do it over a period of time, and they're trying to do it instantly, which doesn't really help. So that brings us to the subject of when you're heating with a heat pump or cooling with a heat pump. We got to think about it as random numbers, but 90-degree outdoor temperature in cooling, and we're trying to make the space temperature 70 degrees. So we have a 20-degree gap. Not that big of a gap realistically. But if you're at 0 degrees outdoor temperature and you're trying to make the house 70 degrees, that's a 70-degree gap. So you figure it's what, at least three times the amount of BTUs you need to heat the house as opposed to cooling it. So if you size it for heating, automatically the system's going to be too big for
Right.
cooling. Customers we have to educate them in the fact that, if you have a multi-zone heat pump system, you have, say a ducted air handler in the attic feeding the second floor and then a couple of heads down on the main floor. We actually tell them in the summertime to shut the main floor heads off. Right. And just run that air handler in order to dehumidify. We want to try to physically pull moisture out of the air and put it down the drain. So
you want to be cold and comfortable, not cold and sticky.
Not cold and sticky, right? Exactly. We want to cool. I would almost rather size a cooling unit a little bit smaller than is required in order to make it run longer.
And give you that extra dehumidification. So you
get that extra, right. All we want to do is we want to keep pulling air across a cold chunk of metal. We've got this big aluminum chunk of coil network in the air handler, and we want to pull the air across it to stick the water to the coil, put it down the drain. So that's where that's one of the big things that just the customer needs to be aware of is if you're trying to heat with a heat pump or if you're just trying to cool with the heat pump with the bonus of heat, that's where we kind of have to size them.
Basically, where you want to size that load. Do you want to size it on the cooling side or the heating side? What do you want it most for?
Right, exactly. And if customers do have supplemental heat, keep it. Right. If you have a pellet stove, a wood fireplace, any of that stuff, keep the stuff because God forbid if you have an electrical failure.
Right.
Nothing to do with the machinery, just the
Anything
electrical
manual.
failure bad.
Yep.
Light off the freaking wood stove. We're
Right.
good to go. But, we've had customers in the past where they've, where we've done heat pump installations in the past.
Yep.
And then a year or two down the road, they say, "Oh, we're going to do the siding over again, so let's re-insulate the house."
Yep.
While we're doing the siding, we're going to change the windows, and we're going to spray foam the attic and encapsulate the basement, make sure that
Make
that's
it
all
super
super
tight.
tight. All of a sudden, the units that we put in 5 years ago
Are now oversized.
are now oversized. Exactly. So when I do my scans, when I'm going into a house to size up a system, I'm scanning it based on what's physically there, where the windows are, where the doors are, and all of that stuff in 3D. But it also asks me questions, like, are the windows original? Are they replacements or recent replacements? So it can kind of figure out when
Right.
they were replaced. If it's a recent replacement, they know they're going to be relatively
Right.
efficient to today's standard.
Single pane, double pane.
Double pane, triple pane, any of those, right? So once I size it up based on that and show them what the heat load is, it's almost like a eye-opening situation where they have a 100,000 BTU boiler in the house, and they have a 40,000 BTU heat load.
Yeah.
And they have a separate water heater.
Yeah.
So there's nothing else they don't need the boiler for anything else. So they're not getting any efficiency out of that machine.
People walk in and see that and they say, "Oh, it's 100,000. We're going to swap it out with 100,000."
Right. Yeah.
that's the
Every single time they did it they put it in 1950.
Yep.
1975 they did it again when
Yep.
the machine was originally 70% efficient, got to be 80% efficient.
Now they're
And
95% efficient.
Now 95 to 90, yeah, some of the boilers are in like the 98% efficiency ranges, where it's like all of a sudden you're getting 98,000 BTUs out of a 100,000 BTU boiler, when before you were only getting 65,000
Right.
BTUs out of a 90.
And you only need 40.
And you only needed 40 in the first place. Even back then, a lot of them, they just size it because, number one, they don't want to be wrong.
Right.
There's, or they're guessed.
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, it's this many square feet. This will do it."
Yep.
Or they had it sitting on the shelf.
Right.
So that's the one thing I wanted to touch on when it comes to like sizing systems, depending on heat pump or cooling. I know when you're out in the field, you come across a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And one of our biggest enemies in the trade of HVAC is rodents.
Big time.
And it's like there's nothing you can do about them.
Yeah, mice are difficult. They love warm places, and the most warm place outside near a house is obviously the condenser. That nice warm compressor that's covered in chewable insulation, and they just go right at it. And there's definitely things you can do to prevent that from happening. And it's not 100%. There's never going to be 100%. Mice can get in the tiniest of holes, but we recommend a lot of things. We put mothballs inside the condenser. Factor, myth, who really knows? But it definitely helps. I've noticed a difference.
I think it works
I've
for us.
I've noticed a difference.
It's crazy because
I've
it's like
cleared out
everyone says
nests
it's a
and then
myth.
put the mothballs in, and you go back the next year to do the maintenance, and they're no longer there.
Yeah.
But they can 100% entirely ruin your system. And it could be, a couple of days. They could be living there for years and never bother anything. But that's the one thing warranty will never cover is mice damage.
Right. And we've had a couple of issues where, we open the machine up, and you can't even tell that there's a
Right.
compressor or anything in there because they've been in there for 2-3 years.
Generations
Yeah,
of
and
mice.
literally, yeah, and they just scatter.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you see like 8 of them run
Yeah.
out of a little teeny condenser. And it's
Yeah.
like, how did they fit in there without getting killed?
Yep.
Because there's
Yeah,
all
there's
kinds
all
of
high
electricity in
voltage.
there everywhere. So, luckily, I've noticed over the past probably 4 or 5 years that manufacturers are paying attention to that.
Yep.
So there's a lot less holes on the machines.
Right. Only necessary ones for
Exactly, just for drainage
and
or
access.
condenser fan grills,
Right.
stuff like that. So luckily, they're sort of getting them to a point where they're almost hermetically sealed. But man, it's like and mice just walk around relieving themselves
Right.
everywhere they go. So it's
Yep.
like all the circuit boards, the wiring. I don't know if when you were a kid, if you ever like grabbed a piece of wire or something that was just on the bench and you just chew on it, it's like it's sweet.
Yeah.
You get like a flavor from
right.
it. Mice. That's what mice do.
Yep.
They taste and then they're like, oh, this, and then they're like, oh, no, this isn't food. And then they chew another spot because they're idiots. And then they realize that this isn't a piece of food either. And then they get electrocuted.
And then they get fried.
Or they short out the board, or they nuke themselves on
Right.
the cap.
Or they chew through a thermistor that has no current through it, and it just
throws the
the
machine
code.
off. Yeah, exactly. The Mitsubishi thermistors,
Yep.
classic. We have a few of them sitting on the shelf because of that reason.
Yep. We did 5 or 6 one winter alone just from mice.
Yep. And it was all in like the 3Cs.
Yep.
It was always a 3C24 or a 3C30,
Yep.
something like that.
They just there's 3 electrical holes in the back that if you have a 4C or a 3C and you're using 2 heads or 3 heads and you got that extra empty spot on the electrical,
Yep.
if you don't plug it, they get in there. And it's
it's
only
a
the
highway.
size of a quarter,
Right,
but they get right through it.
Yeah,
no
they can fit in
problemo.
a half-inch hole.
Right.
And that's a half-inch knockout for those.
And that leads
those
right to
electricals.
the warmth.
Yeah.
Anywhere they wanna
literally,
go.
it's all nice in there. The compressor does have a little belly band. It's called a crankcase heater. It keeps the crankcase of the compressor itself warm, so the refrigerant doesn't saturate into the oil, and it can hydraulic the compressor. So the compressor itself is always sitting at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a little thermistor in there to make
Right.
sure the compressor's 70.
One
So
on
that's
top
like
of
a
the
little
compressor,
mansion,
one at the bottom of the coil, and one at the top of the coil.
Yeah,
And they all measure certain things, but once one goes, they're all on the same plug.
they're all in the same circuit,
Right.
right? So that it's looking at like a common resistance because it's an ohms reading from
Right.
It's a 10,000 ohms resistor. And if it's reading at 8,407 ohms, it means that this temperature is 47 degrees, whatever it is,
Correct.
on the
Yep.
scale. And if you break that wire, you give it zero resistance, so it thinks it's either 400 degrees or it thinks it's 0 degrees,
Right.
so whatever it is. So little stuff. As far as like stuff that customers can do to prevent rodents.
Yeah, they can look outside and just observe the outside of the condenser, any type of holes that you see going inside, what you think are important places besides the fan. Don't cover the fan, and don't cover the back of the coil, obviously. But you can, if you got like some steel wool laying around or something like that, just plug it with that or tape.
Be careful with steel wool too, just depending on electrical.
Right.
If you're sticking that,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're better off, put some masking tape over it and
Right.
call us over,
Yep.
and then we can seal it
We
up,
can
throw
seal it
some
all up.
mothballs at the thing, and
Yep.
and hope for the best. I notice a lot of rodents when you get customers that have like chickens and stuff like that. We have a lot of customers that have chickens and freaking all
There's
kinds
a lot
of
of leftover
animals.
feed laying around.
Yeah, you got feed and stuff laying around. There's a nice warm place to hang out and stuff. There's
Mhm.
definitely shelter, so they find those places, and and then they just make their way to the condensing unit. There's no other option. Or if they get into the fortress or the line hide stuff,
Right.
it's like they're gonna make their way into the house eventually.
Yeah,
You
yep.
know, so we spray foam all our holes, every hole that's going into the house. We spray foam holes that are going into the older units, like the
Right.
4Cs, all those we would seal up all those holes.
Yeah, the smart multis are the ones that they still have that big hole in the back that we spray foam
Yeah.
every install.
Yeah, those. Yeah, exactly. The smart multis are pretty much the only ones we have to really seal up anymore.
Right.
The ported units are all
They're all pretty good.
self-contained.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and I was kind of impressed with the last couple of batches that came through, because I think it does. It seems like it was probably last year or the year before that they kind of started switching that around. Another thing that we should talk about is the way these heat pumps operate, whether it's a ducted machine or if it's a multi-zone type of system. There's a couple of different types of multi-zone systems, so we can talk about both of those as well. The first thing is when the heat pumps are running in heat mode, they're going to, the manufacturers don't want the customer to feel cold air blowing around.
Right.
So they say, okay, well, we're going to put a thermistor on the liquid line or the evap coil, wherever they put it. And when this thermistor reaches 108 degrees, we're going to turn the fan on, and then we can start moving air around. Which I understand. I kind of have an argument against both sides of it if you want to really get into it.
Right.
But that's the idea, is to, just like your normal furnaces and stuff like that. Your furnace
Right.
fires off the gas, the burner lights, it times out, or it has a thermostat in the duct, and after it reaches X temperature or X amount of time, it kicks the blower on, and then it's going to blow warm air around. My argument is that entire duct system is already full of air.
Right.
And that air is already at room temperature. So right when you turn the blower on, you're going to blow that cold air out, and then you're going to follow it up with warm air.
Right.
So my argument, which comment down below if you have a contrary argument to this, but right when you start heating that coil up with the heat pump, aren't you heating the air?
Yeah.
Right?
Realistically, yeah.
Right, just like a burner. You fire the burner off. Why wouldn't you run the fan right when the burner fires
Right.
off? You're wasting all the BTUs that you're creating going up the chimney.
Yep.
Just to make that piece of metal hot, and then we're going to kick the fan on.
Right.
Right, so that's my argument on an efficiency set. From an efficiency standpoint, let's use every BTU of that fuel, as opposed to why are we not using the first minute and a half
Right.
of that fuel?
I think it makes sense for heat pumps only for the ones that where the reversing valve energizes in heat, because like you said, it runs in cooling in the beginning.
There you
So
go.
if you turn that fan on right away, you're gonna get cold air.
Perfect.
You know,
I like this argument, because that's the only reason.
Yeah.
That would be the only reason why I would say, give me a hot coil fan delay on a heat pump. And that was excellent. It didn't even pop in my head until you said it, until you started saying it right now. But I remember we've talked about this in the past, where it's like, the Bosch machines, the older ones, the M18s, and I think the M15s I think also start in cooling. They start in cooling mode first to build up a little bit of head pressure, because the reversing valve needs to see a differential across it before it can slide over, right? Because it's only using refrigerant pressure
Right.
to change that over.
No, there's no electronics going to it.
Right, just one solenoid opens, it allows refrigerant to push on one side of a little plug, and then
Right.
that plug slides over, and then the refrigerant flows out that third pipe. It's
And
the
then
coolest thing ever.
right.
I'm a big reversing valve fan. But it's going to cool for that first minute and a half, 2
Right.
minutes,
Yeah.
until it builds up
Yep.
enough head pressure. And if it's freaking freezing out,
Right.
it's going to take some time for you to actually build head pressure and give it a good differential
And then
to
once
slide.
it switches, you still, it takes a few minutes, especially on the 1.0s, it takes a few minutes to get that warm air going through.
Yeah, they ramp up a little slower than
Right.
they do now. They were like every 3 minutes or something like that.
Which they changed in the 2.0s. If you have
Yeah.
a 2.0 air handler, Bosch, they have that anti-cold delay.
The anti-cold cycle, yeah.
Yeah,
Only
so
on the air handlers.
Only
though.
on the air handlers.
Not
If
on
you
the-
have a coil on top of a furnace, you do not have that option.
That's correct.
Which and can be a flaw and annoying to a lot of some customers, but it's just the price you pay for a heat pump, I guess.
Yeah, and we could wire it up. We could rig up some controls, which is relatively easy to do.
Right.
In order, just to provide a hot coil start. But I don't know. I'm as long as the thing starts in heating, I'm cool with the fan running right
Right.
out of the gate.
Yep.
Because we're going to be moving BTUs. Once you start moving, Even, you get a 1 degree rise out of that
Right.
coil. That's a 1 degree rise. I don't care what
And when people say it's cold, if it unless it's in cooling, if it's in heating, it's definitely warmer than your 98.6, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're feeling 80-degree air.
That's cool.
It feels cool.
Definitely, yeah.
So
Anything below 90
it's
is
like
gonna feel
cold is on a certain
It's a
term,
relative
right?
term,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's colder than my body temp,
Right.
but it's warmer than the space.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's a big thing where it's like there's a bunch of argument. Like I know in Canada, I think in some provinces they actually require you to keep your fan on all the time in heating.
To move air.
Whenever you're on heat, you want that air to keep on moving, and then the burner fire is off. It's going to warm the air up. It's going to come up to temperature.
Right.
But it's already heating right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate.
So I'm interested to see or hear if anyone has an argument about it.
As to why it should or shouldn't turn on
Yeah,
right away.
yeah, I like it on right away.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong. But like even on multi-zone ductlesses, the little heads on the wall, they have a fan on delay too.
Yep.
Which I can appreciate on that.
It's got a whole kind of mode delay. I mean, nothing changes on the head until it reaches temperature. Like
Right.
the vanes won't change, nothing.
And if you think about it, when you have a head that's 65 feet away from the condensing unit,
Mm-hmm.
but the condensing unit, they're feeding the branch box, and then the branch box is then feeding the head. I want to wait a minute
Right.
for that coil to warm up because it's going to take it could take 2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
And if you're blowing 70-degree air around the room for 2 or 3 minutes, it might be a little bit
That's
of
a
an
little chilly.
uncomfortable
Yeah.
situation. Right. So that situation I can get, especially when you're in like a small room.
Well, and once they reach temperature, that's only if they're off for a while. If you have a set temperature on it, say you have it set to 72 and it's, finally kicks back on, it's always going to be warm
Right.
after that. Once it modulates and starts ramping up and down to just maintain your temperature, that's where you get kind of zero cold. There's always going to be some sort of warm, and then hot. But if you leave it off and you go away for the weekend, you come back and you turn it on and you need you want it 72 in there and the house is 60. It's gonna take a minute to get up to temp.
Exactly. It sachets right into a good thing because I was talking to a customer the other day. She has a 2-head system. I think she's in Rockport. She's Cape Ann, and we just put the system in not too long ago, and she's running it in heat now. We had a guy go over and look at it because she said there was an issue where it was blinking or something like that, and then it turned out it was another issue. We took care of that. But then she was concerned that the bedroom was continuously heating even when she had it set down to say 61 degrees. The head was still blowing out some heat because the downstairs unit was calling. This is on a ported system, so it's not on a branch box machine. So the two differences, let me get into that really quick, and then I'll go back right to the story. A branch box machine, the condensing unit feeds a distribution box, which then feeds the refrigerant to the corresponding heads that are throughout the house. A ported system, all of the heads, line sets, the refrigerant piping goes back to the condensing unit. There's nothing in between. There's no branch box. So on a non-branch box system, when one head is calling for heat, say, and the other head is not calling for heat and it's just running the fan or running nothing, usually it just runs fan on super low, but the lower level unit called for heat. It only needed a little bit,
Right.
say 5,000 BTUs worth of heat to warm this room up half a degree when it was 50 degrees outside, say.
But the condenser needs to dump it off somewhere else.
Right. So the condenser has its own little volume knob, right? It can go from like 6 to 11. 10 is max, but if it had to, it could go a little bit
11,
more.
yeah.
It's got that 120% gig. So if that lower level head's only calling for a little bit of heat, the head pressure is going to be high right out of the gate, so
Right.
it's going to be putting out a good amount of heat. And the condenser can't turn down any lower, so it says, I need to get rid of some of this. I'm making it, we need to put it somewhere else. So it'll crack open the valve feeding the head to the master bedroom, and it'll blow a little bit of a warmer air. It's it warmed the room up to like 67 degrees.
Right.
Or it wouldn't allow the room to cool below 67. It wouldn't get any cooler than that, which I guess is not the end of the world to me. But.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, it was kind of warm out. You really didn't need the head in the room to run at all.
At all, right.
Because whatever residual heat from the main floor
It's
you
gonna
have,
rise
it's just going to
anyway.
make its way upstairs, and it's going to keep that room comfortable. And then when you kick that head on, it's just going to have to run for a
Right.
minute to warm the space up, and it's
Exactly.
probably already got warm
Right.
gas there, so it's going to come
If
right
you're
up.
calling for 61, I mean, you really don't even need it on at that point.
Right, just shut it
Just
off.
shut it off.
And I mentioned it, and I was like, you don't need it, so just turn it off. When it gets sub 20 degrees outside and the room is below 67 and you want it to be 67, kick the thing on.
Right.
Nice and easy. And the customer almost suggested that was like a MacGyver style Band-Aid fix.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, it really isn't. That's the fix.
Right.
I was like, if I don't need my heat on in my house, I
Don't
turn
have
it off.
Right.
It's crazy. Imagine that. So.
It's just turn down rate. They don't turn down enough.
Right. We're looking to heat the house to 70 when it's 9.
Right.
When it's 50 out, it's going to be really easy to heat the house.
Right.
Half a degree.
So when you don't need all that much, just turn one of them off.
Right. With the branch box machine, you have more flexibility. It does the refrigerant management, so it sends the rest of the refrigerant back to the condensing
Right.
unit as opposed to another head.
Right.
So that's where you get a little bit more flexibility with the branch box machines, but turn down also becomes a factor with those, because you say you have a 48,000
Right.
BTU machine that can turn down to 14,000 BTUs, but if you only have a 6 column for 4,000 BTUs of heat,
Way too many BTUs.
yeah, so what are we going to do?
Right.
We dump most of it back to the condensing unit. That's why they have those huge receivers on them, or huge accumulators for that matter. But those are the things that they have to kind of factor in. It's like, some of these guys might be crazy and put 4 6s in a 24.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So then we got 48. But what if only one of those 6s calls?
Way too many.
Right. So some of these new multi-zone ductless heat pump manufacturers are coming out with condensers that you can allow up to 6 heads, up to 60,000 BTUs or 72,000 BTUs with the 120%. But what are you going to do? You're going to put
Right. You're never putting a 6 on that thing.
Right. You're better off doing like 12, 12, 12.
Right.
Something.
It's got to be used for the correct.
Right. It's almost like the smallest head is what you want to be for what your lowest turn down
Right.
is. So if it turns down to 14, you got to put a 15
yeah,
on there, an
correct.
18 or
Yep.
something, But just something that that people need to realize as well is, like, when you size these things. If I'm in a 150 square foot bedroom, everybody, any HVAC guy would know it's a 6,000 BTU load, right?
Right.
If not way less than that. Most of the time it is way less.
Which smallest is 6, but
smallest is
they're
6.
definitely coming. They're thinking about it for the future. They're coming out with smaller units.
Yeah, 4s and 5s or
Yeah.
something like that, which is ideal,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you come into cooling season.
Right.
Because if you're sizing it for heating,
Now you'd think that affect the turn down rate as well, right? Are they going to be able to turn them down to below 4?
I doubt
above
it.
4?
So the problem is oil pickup. Once you start turning that compressor so slow, you can't really pick up any oil from the
Right.
crankcase. So then you start you run the pistons dry, and then you'll start nuking compressors. Unless they can figure out some way to do oil injection or something. It gets this is way deep into engineering.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was doing like air compressors, you'd have to get, if you were running them on a frequency drive, you would have to get, these were recips. If you were running them on a freak drive, you had to get had a DD, and the model number was for a double dipper. It had 2 dippers on the connecting rods to catch oil and flip it up onto the crankshaft. Kind of crazy how it gets, but like they had to have launched 50 connecting rods before they realized, hey, maybe we'll put an extra dipper on this rod, to grab some extra oil and throw it up. But a lot of people don't think of that stuff because it's like Back in the day, we used to pull compressors apart. Like you'd have a compressor that blew up.
Hmm.
I'd go over there, I'd take the heads off of it, pull the pistons out, put new pistons on it, put it all back together like I'm rebuilding an engine,
Right.
Now all these new compressors are all just hermetic cans, and we cannot open them. They're hermetically sealed. That's the
Yep.
freaking name,
Just a swap out.
So you just take it out, throw it away, and throw a new one in. But like the problem is like back in the day, you could just pull the valves off a compressor, throw new valves on it, rebuild it. It's an 8-hour job and have the thing running. Now it's like, oh yeah, you need a new compressor. You got to pull the thing out, new compressor, leak check, evacuate, charge, new dryers, all this,
Right.
that, the other thing. Because everyone was lazy back in like the late 90s, I think, where they would say, oh yeah, this compressor's dead. You need a new compressor. Then they just started changing semi-hermetic compressors, which you could have just repaired it, but it ended up being cheaper to replace it than it would be to fix it. So I remember seeing a picture of it's like a compressor graveyard. It's just all Carlisle 06D, 06E compressors just all over the
Right.
place, and it's a sin.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day too.
Yeah, they're all
Same as your
good
TV. If your TV's broken,
Yeah.
you just get a new
Just
one.
throw it out. Yeah, you don't bring it to the TV repairman
Right.
anymore. Because
Exactly.
it's going to
Yep.
cost you about 2/3 the value of a 90-inch.
Right.
One other thing that I like to talk about when it comes to like heating season, and this is outside of heat pumps for once on the HVAC Unfiltered podcast. Gas furnaces, high efficiency gas furnaces. High efficiency gas furnaces, when they burn the fuel, they make a condensate, and that condensate is very acidic because it's a byproduct of combustion. All said and done, we're taking air and we're burning it, and we're extracting every degree out of that fuel, every degree out of that burnt fuel that we can. 96% of it, basically. Right. So what's left is acidic condensation, and that runs down into the heat exchanger, helps cool the secondary heat exchanger. We grab as much heat out of it as we can, and then we dump it into a pump or down the drain. And I'd say it's probably been 11 or 12 years now that code has started to require that we put in a neutralizer canister or a condensate pump, right? Exactly. That has a acid neutralizing tablets. It's just limestone. They look like little marbles, kind of weird little nuggets, like rabbit poop.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. White rabbit poop.
White rabbit poop. Yeah. So, yeah, well, I would say take that as it is. But the condensate runs into it, and then it just kind of sits in there for a little while, and then when it fills up enough, then it finally trickles over the top. But it gives it enough time for it to neutralize the acid that's in it. We had a call down on Main Street, Gloucester, where there was water dripping into the basement of this building. And we looked up, and there was a fitting that was in between the floor of the attic and the ceiling of the main floor, and we couldn't see the fitting. We had to like even get like a camera in there.
Yeah.
It's like they put the thing in, and then they ended up, I don't know, they pre-built it. So Dave went back to replace the fittings and stuff to make sure it was tight between here and there, because we were under the assumption that it was either a bad crimp on a ProPress, a ProPress was there, or the pipe, the PVC was cracked because it was PVC to brass or whatever.
Yep.
And then when Dave brought it back to the shop, the copper was as thin as paper.
Wow.
I kept the fitting. It's still at the shop. And I pulled the ProPress right off of it because the crimp wasn't even crimped. It was crimped, but it didn't care because the pipe was literally split right down the middle because it kind of caved in on itself.
Wow.
And that's where it was dripping from. It was like, well, there's no neutralizer on there.
Right.
Right when I saw that, when he sent the picture to me, I was like, dude, is that on a furnace? And he's like, yeah, it's a 90% furnace. I'm like, no way, man, you could have put a neutralizer on that thing. They put it in whenever. It was relatively new, probably less than 10 years old.
Yeah.
But
gotta get acid neutralizers. I see them all the time. No, they're just regular pumps, and then the pumps fail because it just corrodes all the PVC or all the parts inside the pump or the tube where the water runs from the pump to wherever it's going.
Right.
But you definitely need an acid neutralizer pump.
Yeah, it's and if people think it's a scam, it's like I'll have them put up a picture of the piece of pipe and put it right above my head right here,
Yeah.
uh, to show you that this is real. This is, and
Yeah.
it's like you could tell that there was no way a human could do that unless they were using like a torch.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, acid neutralizer tablets. You got to change them.
Right. Once a
People,
year.
yeah, it's like you got to do maintenance. This is like just basic stuff. Like you got to put air in your tires. You got to change your oil. You got to change your filter on your
Yeah.
on
Well,
your air
because they
handler.
don't last forever. The lime rocks eventually kind of wither down
They
to
just-
nothing,
yeah,
but they
they get-
form and they like kind of weld themselves together,
Right. They
and then
kind of
there's nowhere for the water to go,
exactly. Yeah.
and
so
then the water just
annually,
overflows.
they want you to change them annually. It's relatively inexpensive. I don't know.
I think
what,
it's like $10
yeah,
to
I think
replace
10
the
or
tablets.
$12
Yeah.
just for the tablets. It's like nothing. So you're better off doing it because if you have cast iron piping leaving your house going underground to your sewer main, guess what's getting eaten from the inside out if you don't have an acid neutralizer
Right.
on it? That, if you have PVC, fantastic, but I still recommend it because you don't want to screw around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just that's what it really comes
It's
down
just
to.
avoid disasters at all costs.
Yeah, it's preventative maintenance is exactly that.
Right.
It prevents catastrophes. So I think what else? I wanted to talk about like dry events and stuff really quick. Dry events, duct cleaning and stuff, because there's always these contradicting statements going around on the internet, Facebook, all that stuff, saying oh, you don't need to get your dry events cleaned, or you don't have to get your ducts cleaned.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's a scam, and it's really not. We've seen the ins and outs of what these ducts look like, and you'd be surprised what you're breathing in. Even though it's before the filter, stuff gets by those filters. The filters aren't foolproof. You see. I've found mugs in ducts. I've found I found a pack of M&Ms from like the 70s.
The 70s.
Yeah.
You're right.
And it's wild what you'll see, but that just shows that the ducts hadn't been cleaned since then. And
Right.
so you're breathing in, I don't even know, the plague at that point.
Yeah, who knows? Whatever the popular disease
Right.
was that year. Yeah, but that's the thing is like a lot of people think, oh well, but yeah, it's all down in the ducts. It's just stuck there. So
Right.
what do I have to worry about? Well, it's not just stuck there.
Right.
It does come off.
Yep.
And then it comes off randomly. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to just be all airborne all
Right,
the time.
exactly, yeah. And even if it's still stuck to the duct, it's that one piece of dust. There's a million particles on it, so it's just constantly just letting them go.
Yep.
And it's not good to breathe in.
No, exactly. And it's like
And if you have pets, it's even worse.
pets, carpets,
Yep.
kids.
Yep.
If your unit's in the basement
Yep.
and your registers are in the floor.
Oh, I found a whole kid's breakfast before.
Exactly.
It's-
Exactly. So it's like that's all gravity.
Any
all
Cheerio that
of
didn't
it's
make it
gonna
in the
fall
kid's
down.
mouth ended up in that duct.
Right. Exactly. And it's like for some reason they set the high chair up over it,
Right.
and they never had to clean up afterwards.
Yep.
Imagine that.
And dogs love laying on the heat, on the vents for the heat, or
Yep.
laying on the return to even cool off,
Right. Just to feel the breeze.
just to feel the breeze, right?
Yep.
And all that fur and dander is getting sucked right down that vent.
Yeah, and it's like I used to know the stat right off the top of my head, but it's like the average human loses like 4 pounds a year of hair and dry skin.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's something
It's
like
kinda gross.
significant. It's like a decent amount of weight, and all of that's on the floor.
Yep.
Or in the air, or in your ducts. Or
Oh yeah,
any of
when you
that
look
stuff.
at any type of light, if you see little particles, that's human
That's
skin,
stuff
hair,
or
yeah.
dust, any kind of dust.
Yep.
It's just,
It's
so
not great.
duct cleanings, high efficiency air filters.
Yep.
iWaves.
Yep.
Two huge things you could do. The high efficiency air cleaner is one,
Right.
but the iWave itself paired up with a high efficiency air cleaner.
It's
It's huge.
I've never heard a bad thing about the iWaves, and they notice that like they stop their allergies are better,
Yeah, you stop seeing the God rays coming through the windows.
Right.
You stop seeing the floaters floating in the God rays.
Right,
type
exactly,
Of thing,
yep.
It's like
They
all of
notice
that
a
stuff.
lot less dust on the shelves or on the TV. You know,
Yep.
it's a little device. It looks like it does nothing, but it actually does a lot.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's a bipolar ionization device.
Yep.
So it's charging things in positives and
Negative
negatives.
ions. Yeah.
And when those come near each other, they end up magnetizing technically together. They bond together. So the first week or so, when you put these things in, I've had customers call and they say, you said that this thing was going to do a lot about the dust, and I've noticed there's a lot of dust bunnies and stuff around in the corners of my rooms and on the stairs and stuff like that. I explain it out of the gate so they know, this is all hypothetical,
Right.
but they do notice more dust after the first couple of weeks because all of the dust that's in the air is clumping together and forming those big wads,
So you can
and
catch them.
and then you can clean them all up. After you do that, the first week or two, you'll never see them again.
Right.
That's the crazy thing about it because there's nothing's going to be in there,
Right.
or the small amount that's in there is going to be so small that it's hopefully getting caught by the filter, number one,
Right.
or number two, it's just not there in the first
Right.
place. But that's a big thing too, is just keeping
Viruses too. It takes away,
viruses,
it
kills
kills
viruses,
Yep.
bacteria, mold,
Yep.
all of that stuff. They were saying like within 30 minutes, a 90 square foot room was completely clean out of, in this one test room
Right.
that they did, that, on the pamphlet that we hand out. But it's definitely something to think about, especially where, like we have a couple of customers, they're immunocompromised, and they need to make sure that the air in their house is like clinical type of super clean air. They don't want to, we don't want to mess anything up. So
I had a customer that had recently had a heart transplant, and they needed their house to be super, super clean.
yeah, so full
mask,
duct cleaning.
booties, and then they didn't have an iWave, offered an iWave.
Yep.
And they jumped on it. So that's something that is kind of definitely worth it.
Right, it's like $500 or something.
Yeah.
It's not cheap, but it's a really small investment to make for the benefit that you get out of it.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned,
I mean, it's probably right around the same price, maybe even cheaper than getting like UV and all that stuff, because those can go for a hefty penny if you want to
but
install
you
them
got
in
to
all your
change.
ducts.
You have to change UV bulbs
Right.
and all that stuff
Yeah.
too, and these bulbs aren't cheap.
Right.
And you got to do it. They want you to do them like annually.
Yeah. There's
it's
no
like
maintenance on
no
this thing.
maintenance on the iWave. You flick the thing off, flick it on, it spins those little things around, flicks off the wicks, and
Right. That's
right
it.
back in business.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here we go. That's your maintenance done.
Yeah.
But they made it relatively foolproof. They're good for any machine from 1 to 6 tons. They do have them for mini split heads. The iWave M's, the iWave R's are the residential ones up to 6.
They have iWave C's.
The
It's
C's
for
are good up to
commercial.
10 tons, I
Yep.
think, or they might even be 12 tons. But you can stack them.
Right.
So if you have a 25-ton unit, you can
Double
put
it up.
2 of them in.
Yep.
You can put 3 of them in if you want. Realistically, they
Right.
don't, they don't judge. But it's pumping those ions through the duct, through the, depending on where you put the
They want
iWave,
it usually in the blower section,
In the
after
blower
the filter,
section.
before the coil.
after filter before coil, right? Because it'll actually get caught up in the filter,
Right.
which is weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so after the filter, before the coil, so it'll kill anything going through the coil, kill anything coming into the blower, all the way down the supply, and then eventually they start making their way back
Right.
up the return. So
Oh, you'd notice a whole lot. Even your
Yep.
coils cleaner, everything.
exactly. So
definitely do it.
yeah,
if you can.
if you at least research them. iWaves, they buy New Calgon. I've been a New Calgon fan since like forever. They make
Yeah.
all the chemicals we use for condenser coil cleaner, evaporator coil cleaner, pump sprayer, all that stuff.
Bubbles to find
Bubbles.
leaks, anything. They make
Right.
it all.
So New Calgon, link in the description. Maybe,
Maybe.
probably not. But we don't run the highest of operations here, so if I can figure that out. Next is
Dryer vents.
yeah, dry events. So there is an actual code on dry events,
Right.
and people don't know that there's a code on it as far as flexible duct, vinyl duct, hard duct, how far you can do it, where you can put it, all of that stuff. When we go and do our dry event cleanings, we do mention these problems, address these problems, and
Right.
try to come up with solutions, but sometimes it depends on how the house was built. So see people do
Right.
some crazy
We've
stuff.
seen some crazy stuff, and a lot of it sometimes it's like not accessible, or if the dryer vent goes all the way through the wall, you know, you don't know what you're gonna find down there. We have a duct camera that we can use to kind of guide down there and take a peek at what's going on. But I've seen dryer vents that had been disconnected for, I don't know, God knows how long,
Yeah,
because
years. Yeah.
yeah, it was just blowing below the floor into basically the first floor, blowing into the ceiling of the second floor. So that gap between the first floor and the basement, just blowing in there for
Just full, probably just full of lint.
yonks. Yep, it was just
Wow.
full of dust, not connected whatsoever.
Imagine.
Um, yeah, and a typical homeowner's not gonna, they're just gonna turn the dryer on and just dry the clothes, and the
Dry-
clothes are still drying.
Clothes dry,
Right.
right? Exactly. Why would I know? They didn't. And you probably wouldn't even notice it warming up downstairs because
Right.
you're blowing it above the
Right.
ceiling. So it's not
Yeah,
like
the
it's
only way you'd eventually notice is if the lint was moist enough to eventually make a mark.
soak through the ceiling, right? Yeah, or plug up enough where it wouldn't dry your clothes
Right,
anymore.
exactly.
And you're gonna
Yeah.
freaking stick the camera down there.
Yeah.
And be like, look what you got. Here's your problem.
But a lot with dryer vents too is like once moisture gets in that line, if you have a dryer vent going through your attic, and you got just one of those flexi hoses that have a bunch of dips in it.
Yeah.
The lint gets caught in one of those dips, and then the moisture eventually traps there, and it just creates this pile of
It's a solid mass of
Right.
lint.
lint.
Yeah, literally, you can pick it up and
Yep.
snap it in half.
If there's one tear and it's in the attic and there's moisture in there over the winter or the summer or whatever, and it gets in there, it ruins the whole thing.
Yeah.
You just got to rip it out.
You just take the whole duct out, yeah,
Yep,
and just
put a new
refresh
one
it.
in. Yep.
And it probably end up being less expensive than doing the dryer vent cleaning
Right,
itself.
yeah, it is.
Or
Relatively.
relatively
Yeah,
close,
right.
But yeah, so that's a big thing. Is a lot of people they grab those aluminum flexi hoses.
Yep.
Because it's a dryer vent hose. It's
Yep.
cool, but you can't put that in an attic.
Nope.
You can't run that inside of a wall.
Nope.
It has to be accessible.
Can't be more than 25 feet away
No
from the
more
dryer.
than 25 feet away from the dryer, right? Once it exits the wall,
I think you can only have, what is it, only like 8 feet from the dryer to the penetration
to
of
the wall
Yeah.
itself. Yeah, like you can't have 30 feet of dryer vent running across
Right.
your basement, which I've seen.
Yeah, right. Which we've seen, yeah.
You've seen it.
I've seen one that was,
What about the one? The dryer was on the main floor, the finished lower level, but it had a main floor. The dryer vent went down
Yep.
across the basement,
yeah,
then back up, and then went back out.
yep,
And it was like 40 feet.
yeah, yep. Saw
And-
one too with an inline fan. Luckily, they put an inline fan, but it was connecting two dryers. So
No
it was
way.
one dryer coming down from the second floor, and another dryer from in the basement, and they were going into the same one, but they had an inline fan after the tee, where they teed in together, and they were exiting the same vent. And so now that's just double trouble. And the vent, the inline fan, was plugged with lint.
Solid.
Yeah.
Was it a dryer vent inline fan?
It was just one of those Fantech
Booster
inline,
fan.
yeah, booster
the
fans.
yeah, that's not it.
Yeah. No, but that's what it was.
That's not the one.
The customer's son did it, so it was just.
Yeah, he wasn't well versed in proper techniques for
exactly.
dryer vent installations.
It might have worked for a while, but I had to take apart the fan and clean the fan. It was a very long. It was almost like a 5-hour dryer vent cleaning.
No way.
When they should last like an hour.
An hour?
You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. I did one at a fitness a workout. What is it? A gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a word. At a gym in Boston, and it was two 12-inch dryer vents that were coming off of booster fans. They were Fantech fans, but they were dryer vent booster
Made
fans.
for that, yeah.
But the thermostat in the booster fan had failed, so the fan never came on. Dryer was running, and it was all white towels. This place was a ritzy white towel place. And all of the white lint was backed up from the booster fan all the way back to the dryer. Solid column of lint.
12-inch lint.
12-inch lint. So we ended up. I don't remember if Dave had to go there with. I was there I don't know. I was there forever. and I ended up having to pull the whole thing apart. I pulled it all out by hand, and whatever my shop vac could reach. We
Right.
didn't have a dry vent cleaner machine, and I got it to as good as I could. Got replaced both the booster fans, kicked them on, and then it looked like it was snowing outside
Wow.
when we first turned the things on. It was awesome.
That's
Right on.
funny.
It was like Milk Street, right in the financial district down Boston. It was awesome. But that was 20 years ago.
What month was it? Snowing in July?
It was. It was summertime.
Yeah.
It was definitely summertime. Yeah. But yeah. So that's my story. We're gonna get wrapping up. We've been here forever. I'm impressed. But no, I appreciate you coming in today, Nick. This is it's
Yeah,
a huge
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
It's fun because like once we start getting on subjects and we can.
The stories start flying in.
Right, once you start remembering,
Right.
because it's like you don't remember them until you actually come across it. Like
Right.
the next time, you're like, "Oh man, remember this time?"
Yeah.
And then trying to jog those memories is difficult. But any suggestions for future podcasts? Make sure you definitely put something down in the description. I think we got a comment one time,
Oh, there we go.
so if we can get a comment, that'd be sweet.
Let's make it 2.
Yeah, let's go for 2. And we'll see you on the next one. I appreciate you guys coming out. Thanks so much.